My name is Jermaine Nkrumah. This is a brilliant edition of Diaspora Weekly. I am honored, honored to be joined by the one and only, Her Excellency, Professor Abena Busia. Welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to be
You
here.
know,
Yeah.
there's, I have to get off something right from the beginning. Because of your father's excellence, the high level, I mean, I don't think you can go wrong. I think you're born with it. I mean, if you're a Busia, there's certain aura about you. And I think so far you Busia kids have lived up to the billing quite impressively.
That's kind, living off vicarious glory, We had a pretty cool mother too.
Right, right. So how is let's talk about I'm gonna put the titles aside a little bit because we want to know the little girl Abena Busia. What about you that the rest of us don't know? I know you're all in Wikipedia, you're all over the place, but there's got to be that something that when you read about yourself, say, I'm going to keep this one. Nobody needs to know that.
That's a tough question. I don't think I have any deep secrets. But your question is interesting because whenever I teach, because my subject really has to do with identity at heart, when I'm teaching literature, I teach courses on Africa and the diaspora and images. We have to think about how we present ourselves to the world. Because, of course, for a lot of us in the diaspora, if you're in the academy, we are wrestling with the difference between how we see ourselves and how we are seen. That whole question of the image of Africa out there. So it's something I make my students think about because I point out to them, for example, I walk in on the first day of class and I say, I'm Abena Busia, I'm teaching this class, I've been at Rutgers all these decades, I was born in Ghana, grew up in England, I did my research on images of Africa and came and I'm part of a group of, and you see, everything is to explain why this Ghanaian woman is teaching this course on race and representation in African American literature, or whatever it is I'm doing. So I go through all that, and then I stop and I say, of course, that is my intellectual background. I said, you will spend 15 weeks with me, and by the end of it, you will have no idea, probably, whether I'm married or single, whether I'm Christian or not, you will know nothing about me because what I choose to tell you has to do with my intellectual history to legitimate myself in doing this course. And my introduction to myself, doing a course on Black literature, is slightly different from my introduction to myself if I'm teaching African feminism. And it's very different from my introduction to myself when I stand in front of a youth group of the Methodist Church, of which I'm the lay leader, in which case, and that's different from my introduction to myself at the beginning of a poetry reading. We always tell different about ourselves, depending on text, don't we?
Yeah, but you see, to the question, who is Abena Busia from a character standpoint? I mean, the reason why I ask is that people know a figure, they don't know the human being. I don't know if people even think what your tendencies are when you're upset, what your tendencies are when you're sad, what your tendencies are when you're happy, things of that nature. You would not read that in the bio. That's I
No,
ask again, who is Abena Busia?
I love dancing. When I'm grieving, I
Mhm.
write poetry. When I have a
Okay,
problem, I pray first. The thing I love doing best is dining with people I love, whether at
okay,
home or what have you. The thing, I think I built my life on my three F's: my faith, my family, and friendships. Friendships are important and really valuable.
okay.
I love dancing, I crochet, I love the theater.
Ah,
I read.
very good. So,
Um,
so you are a pure artist.
I'm a very humanities person, yes. Although, I
Humanities,
did do
okay,
A level mathematics, it was a challenge. And, it's
okay.
interesting because I have a friend, we were at boarding school together. We've now been friends for, what is it, 52 years. She's a mathematician.
Mm-hmm.
In my
Okay.
secret life, um,
Mm-hmm.
the amongst the kinds of people I admire most are bridge
Mm-hmm.
builders,
Who?
because people who build bridges,
Bridge builders. Okay. Uh-huh.
absolutely, because you see, they to me marry two wonderful parts of the human spirit. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you are contemplating building a bridge, you're standing one side of a
Mm-hmm.
gulf that you
Okay.
have to get over. And that is a very lyrical, metaphor, human communion thing to want to do. But a bridge has to work. A
Okay.
bridge which people are walking over and, buses are going over, trains are going over, has to work. And so that's that engineering, mathematical, you need to know the geography of the landscape it's going over or through. You need to know the windscape. It's delicate, intricate business. If a bridge builder gets the maths wrong, thousands of people are going to die.
That is
So it's
very
that
interesting you say that. So basically, am I hearing you saying that the art of building a bridge is a fusion between arts and science?
and aesthetics. So
Okay.
many
Okay.
bridges are also really beautiful
Okay. Okay.
in their landscape. Yes.
Interesting. So you love bridge building. Well, I'm gonna throw. If you love bridge building, then you will love Donald Trump.
No,
Okay, we'll leave it at that. All right. You
believe
know,
it. Ethics is important.
I know. Let's when I was sometimes, when people look at you, they think that, oh, your father was a prime minister of Ghana and you enjoyed it. But when you look at the time that you were born, you really didn't see much of that, did you?
No, you
How
know, it, my father was prime minister for less than 3 years.
right.
I mean, in terms of being my father's daughter, my life has been far more impacted by the fact that he was exiled twice than the fact that he
Okay.
was prime minister of Ghana. In terms of the
Ah,
dailiness of my living, we left
okay.
Ghana when I was 6, came back when I
Okay.
was, 13. My mother and I
Okay.
were home the day of the 72 coup. It was supposed to be my my gap year, and I was coming home to spend a year at home for the first time since I was 6. And the soldiers came, and we were marched out at gunpoint,
Wow.
after 3 weeks under arrest, and don't come back until my father's funeral 6 years later.
Wait, you said you were marched out, and where did they take you?
Oh, well, we were fortunate. My mother and I are amongst the few wives and children of people who have been coup against, who live to tell the story. We were under house arrest for 3 weeks, and then they allowed us to leave the country. We left the country. They allowed us to go and find father wherever he was. At the time we got on the plane, we actually didn't know where he was, but they let us leave to return to England.
Interesting. And so you said you've been exiled twice. You've been exiled twice. What was the second one about?
Well, the second one was the fall of the Progress Party. The first one was under Nkrumah.
Okay. All right, very good. So you at 6 years old, what was it like? What were you thinking? I mean, did you really understand what was going on?
No, not a clue. I didn't even know that we had been in exile until the day of the 66 coup, when it ended.
Look at that.
In the sense that father was initially going on sabbatical, and we went from Ghana to the Institute of Social Studies in The Hague, where there were professors from all over the world. We then went to El Colegio de Mexico, where there were people from all over the world. We then ended up in Oxford at St. Anthony's, where there were people from all over the world. So my idea of what professors did was that they taught and then they went somewhere else for a while and then went somewhere else, because everywhere we went, there were people from all over the world. It wasn't until the day of the coup we realized, this had not been voluntary. And then when I became a professor myself and got tenure, and I've had the privilege of, I've had one job all my life. Until I was appointed ambassador, had one job. I've had visiting lectureships in different places. I taught at University of Cape Coast and Ghana, but all those things I was on leave from Rutgers.
Interesting.
I was appointed.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'm one of the few people I know who was employed by a university. I was employed on the basis of chapter of my doctoral dissertation, was given a couple of years to finish it, and was put on the tenure track, was tenured, and my entire academic career has been at Rutgers.
So now you've grown, you've read about it, and you've understood the ramification of the 1970 coup. We know what happened eventually to the man who overthrew your father. His children, his family members. Have you ever interacted with any of them before?
With Achampong's children, no. I mean, but that's not to say I've been avoiding them. Our paths have not crossed. I have not looked for them.
Okay.
But our paths have not crossed.
If your paths crossed, what do you anticipate the interaction would be like?
Well, the history has been painful for them too. I remember when in 1979, after the so-called June 4th revolution, all those soldiers were summarily executed. I remember getting into a lot of trouble in London because I had, prior to June 4th, I had been invited to speak. It was the Brong-Ahafo Association was having a meeting. You know, they met regularly. And by coincidence, I had been invited to talk that month. And then that thing happened. And I changed everything that I had planned to say, because I went there and I said, this is not right. And I remember a lot of people getting angry with me, saying, this man destroyed what your father was trying to do, and blah, blah, blah. How can you say this? And I said, because what my father was trying to do was to establish a democracy under the rule of law.
Okay.
And so personally, I am against capital punishment, but that's not the point.
Okay.
I said, I can understand if a country has punishment for treason is capital punishment, but this man was not tried. They were not tried in a recognized court of law. You do not pick people. I mean, I don't think what he did was right, but I also don't think the response to what he did was to pick him up and summarily execute him and not even let the families know where they were buried. That is not what we were trying to establish.
Okay.
So I was very proud of President Kufuor when the first thing he did when he became president in 2001 was to look for those bodies, have them exhumed, have the testing done, and return the remains to the families so they could be buried.
Wow. Okay, so now the difference is that the man who overthrew your father did not execute your father. Like you said, he allowed you guys to leave the country. Now,
your father was actually out of the country. I don't know what he would have done had father been in the country. My mother and I were saved by the fact that father was at the Prime Minister's conference.
Oh, okay, okay. And so, so you were not you were against the execution of General Kufuor Champon, but not necessarily the overthrow. I'm sorry?
No, I mean, yes. I mean, by the time, I mean, he had already been, by the time he was executed, he'd already been overthrown by his friend.
Right.
He had already been overthrown by Kufuor.
Overthrown by his friend. That's correct. That's correct.
Yes, yes. Okay. So, but my point was, as a civil society, we were trying to tell these soldiers, we want a democracy of laws.
Okay.
We don't want a democracy of cowboys.
Very good. So both of you.
Yes, that's my only point. That was the point.
I get you. Your sister, Akusia. Yes. She's also, like I said, the beginning, you guys have made excellent lives for yourself. What's it like being a sister? You like you said, you've been a professor, academically accomplished. She on the other side, artistically accomplished, being a famous actor and all. What's it like? What's your relationship like growing up? I'm sure the fights. You borrow her.
Friends.
What's that?
We're each other's best friends.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know what I cannot conceive of what my life would have been like without my little sister. I really can't.
Wow. Okay. Well, you want to let us into some of the teenage fights? I know sisters fight. I got two of them. I got two girls. I know they get into those little fights. What were they like?
Actually, I know you won't believe it, but my sister and I seldom fought. don't fight.
Seldom. Seldom. Not never.
Well, we never fight about big things. No. I get,
Really?
when we were growing up, we get irritated sometimes because you want to do something and she wants to do something else. But I know people find it strange, but people who know us will attest to that. We actually don't. We do a lot of things together, and it's very strange. Like, when Mama founded the Busia Foundation, and when she was alive, we did a lot of programs, and we never had to decide, oh, you do this and you do this. We would decide what we're doing, and we would just naturally, she'd be doing one set of things and I'd be doing another, make it work, and we seldom had to discuss it. I don't know, I guess we've got complementary talents and personalities that makes it easy to from domestic, we'll be together in the kitchen and cooking something, and it'll naturally fall out that one of us is making one thing and one of us is making the other without really having to discuss it. Occasionally she'll get an idea.
She lived on the West Coast and you on the East Coast, right?
Yes, for a long time. Yes.
Okay.
We were on opposite.
Did you ever get together often, or was mostly by phone and stuff?
A bit of both. I mean, we managed for although she was on the West Coast and I was on the East Coast, we always managed to do things like whenever she had a job that required a plane flight, somehow the plane always had to be routed through Newark, New Jersey.
What a coincidence.
I had an opportunity to have a sabbatical and I took it in LA. And also there were the seasons when both of us were returning first to England and then to Ghana when Mother was alive. So every summer we were home was wherever Mother was. And so whatever we were doing, we managed to find ourselves back with Mother over our summers and so on. And, Akosua, very often when she was filming on location, I would break and go and visit, but she would often take Mama with her, like, when she was filming for months on Louisiana, for example, she flew Mama and Mama spent time with her on the set of Louisiana. So, you manage to find ways to see each other.
We wake up every morning to different stories from politics, business, sports, and entertainment. These stories, one way or the other, affect our lifestyle and dealings with family, friends, and business associates. Your take on Diaspora Network Television gives you an opportunity to have your take on these pertinent issues via phone in and messages to our social media platforms, DNT Ghana on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If it's an important trending story, we will definitely talk about it. Your take with me, Yalsichi, on DNT.
Would you buy anything without first knowing exactly what the product was and how it could benefit you? Definitely not. Neither should you vote for your next member of parliament without knowing who they are and how they plan to solve your problems. Watch The Next MP only on Diaspora Network Television and find out the men and women who want to represent you in parliament. The Next MP only on DNT.
Feminism. You believe in feminism. What do you see feminism in Africa?
It is all over the place. And there is a lot of work being done. On the continent still, it's still always spoken of as if this, capital blood red F. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. I think if people stopped thinking of the politics of the word in Europe and thought about how our societies have historically managed to recognize themselves, the things we reverence, the things we accept, they would be a whole lot less terrified of the word. It simply means think as if women mattered.
Huh.
You know.
So
And
do we? So now, in an age of Black Lives Matter, maybe we should have we can replace the B with an F. Feminine Lives Matter. Is that what feminism is about?
I think that could be one way of looking at it. You see, a lot of people who initially resisted Black Lives Matter, it was one of that used to drive me crazy when you would say Black Lives Matter and some entitled Caucasian person would look at you and say, oh yes, but all lives matter. As if to say Black Lives Matter was denying that other lives matter. No. What you need to deal with is the historical circumstance that make the cry Black Lives Matter important. If Black lives mattered, we wouldn't have to say so. We have to say so because you are societies that are demonstrating over and over and over again that you do not see us as human. You do not see us as important. You refuse to look at the structural, because this is the other thing. Racist acts of aggression and macroaggression end up always having individual import on individual lives. But the issue is not the individual life as such, but the system that makes it possible for any given individual Caucasian person to treat any individual Black person in the way they do and get away with it with impunity. And the other day I read something in the Catholic Recorder in the United States, which was so profound. It was a piece by a Catholic activist talking about the Amy Cooper incident. I'm sure you remember it happened the same day as George Floyd was murdered. The white woman in Central Park who called the cops on the man who wanted her to leash her dog. Right? Mm-hmm. You remember that?
You're right. I know the story.
This article talked about how we needed to look more closely at that. Not that the George Floyd didn't matter, but the George Floyd incident was so obviously and outrageously and egregiously wrong. There were few people who would debate it.
Right.
So this man said, no, we need to look at what happened in Central Park. Because you see, that woman was absolutely depending on the long legacy of structural racism and its impact. Because she was weaponizing and playing on the fact that she knew that as a white woman, calling police authorities on an African American, that all kinds of sedimented histories would come into play that made her automatically correct, automatically a victim, automatically in need of rescue, and him unquestionably guilty, threatening, dangerous, and in need of restraint.
You have been a professor for quite a while. You've taught white children, Black children, Hispanic children, all kinds of children. So how does it make you feel when, by default of you being Black, a white supremacist automatically that he's superior to you? I'm thinking that's why they use the word supremacy. How does it make you feel?
It's not comfortable, but I have to say something, and it's one of the privileges of the classroom.
Okay.
And I walk into the classroom, I'm the teacher. Okay.
Right. Right.
And some people might be surprised they've never had a Black person, never had a woman, what have you. But usually they get over that before the end of the first class. Classrooms
Okay. How do they get over that?
Because there's a strange sense in which, at least in the humanities, you're in the classroom with a common purpose, with a common project. The classroom space, it's not about you. It's about coming to see how we learn and understand. If I'm teaching a course on the literature of, women of the African diaspora, I'm coming in to teach Toni Morrison and Amate and Paul and what have you. The people in that room are there to learn about that. So if you walk in and manage to give them a story that matters to them, that you're going to share with them to explore, in the context of the room itself, that goes away. That is to say, in 40 years of teaching, I almost never felt that my Blackness, my womanness was dismissed and disrespected in that space. That's not to say things didn't happen outside the classroom, but I think for most of us, maybe I was just lucky, I don't know, but I never dealt with a questioning of my authority as a teacher in the classroom.
Right. Yeah, but you see, what I'm saying is now within the context of the classroom. I'm saying that when you use the word like supremacy, right? Supremacy is derived from superior or superiority.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Now, if by default white is superior to Black, then it stands to reason that at all levels, it would be whites that would be imparting knowledge and wisdom to Blacks or minorities. But you have it reversed. So the concept of white supremacy outside of the classroom in real life, how does it make you feel?
I have spent my life opposing it, trying to teach people how it works, trying to teach us all to understand the way it has shaped the world in which we live, and trying to get us all to be responsible for transforming it. That is what I do. That's what I do. And the thing about, again, institutional structure is that the hardest things to change are the things that shape the world in which we live and that we don't notice because we don't stop to interrogate them. And the difficult work is to get us to interrogate. I'll give an example from the beginning of my own professional life. I did my degree, both my degrees at Oxford. I wrote my dissertation on images of Africa in post-war popular fiction. It was a study of the war. Now, I remember in my prefatory chapter writing a sentence that says something like, all these are event-centered, hero-based novels. I just said it and then went on to analyze it. I didn't interrogate just that one sentence. I end up at Rutgers University, which has one of the oldest and most distinguished women's studies programs in the country. I was privileged decades later to end up as chair. But so I end up at an institution where there are people who are beginning to interrogate that. And so I had to look at my own doctoral dissertation which was wonderful and one of the earliest of its type. But I did not ask, why are these novels always centered around a hero? What is going on here? Women. Now, I had noticed that even within those novels, there are hierarchies. In the novels that I was studying, the heroic white man always ended up married to the virtuous blonde. If you were a dark-haired woman in Africa, you were suspect. A dark-haired single woman in Africa, if she wasn't a nun, was running away from a sexually deviant. Ooh, she used the pill. I mean, you know, there was this hierarchy. And if a white woman in any of these novels actually fell in love with an African man and married him, you know she was going to end up dead, and dead in a brutal fashion. She wasn't allowed to live.
You see, and that's what brings me to this point. This thing, I don't think we as Black people will realize that subconsciously what has been ingrained by reading these books, like you analyzed, right? Even with us, Black men, we look at two women, both drop dead beautiful. One is light skin, the other one is darker skin. Automatically, we infer the beauty on the lighter skin, subconsciously.
Yeah.
Why? Are we ever going to get out of that? Are we ever going to overcome that?
We're going to have to, but it's to take acknowledgement. You see, you've just made a statement that so many Black men, if you say that to them, they will fight you. They will deny it. They will tell you to get over your complex, whatever, because they don't want to. Okay. Yes. Now, if you're prepared to face it, we can have a conversation. But if you're not prepared to face it, there's nowhere to go.
Yes.
So what kind of work are we prepared to do on ourselves? You see, that kind of work takes courage and integrity. That, to me, is the single biggest thing that has happened since George Floyd. Because we all know George Floyd is not the first. He wasn't even the last. People have been killed since George Floyd. The difference is that for one concatenation of forces, for the first time, made the dominant culture say, we need to look at ourselves, and we need to look at ourselves structurally.
So do you think this will last? Do you think this will last? I actually think
it might. Yes, I do. I may be naive.
You think we've turned a corner? You think we've turned a corner?
Yes, I do.
And what have you seen that brings you to that conclusion?
Strangely enough, a number of things. First of all, the mass response around the world. Black Lives Matter has been around for a decade or more. Okay? They've been doing things. The mass response around the world. That's one. The institutional responses. Now, we know some police departments are resisting it, but you've never had state governors, city, and so on saying, actually, yes, let's rethink this. People have saying to city fathers for decades, we need to think the nature of the public art and architecture that we have. It has got nowhere. But suddenly, in the last couple of months, those statues have come down. Now, I don't think they should disappear because they represent a history that people wanted to whitewash and disappear. But let's collect them all and put them in a park and make it a teachable park. We forget who Cecil Rhodes was. He wasn't only the person who funded the scholarships. We need to think about how come the money to fund scholarships.
Okay, so compare and contrast the coming down of the statues and the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Mm-hmm.
Compare and contrast. Do they? What's the difference? Are those two equally monumental?
Yes, they are equally monumental. They are different, though. You see, the fall of the statues represents people acknowledging that they need to rethink who they are. You know, if you think about the Old Testament, the children of Israel had all those rituals of atonement where they would get together and say, we have done this, we need to sacrifice, we need to apologize, we need to do whatever. And that collective acknowledgement of something being amiss.
Okay.
Those statues coming down are a representation of the people in power finally acknowledging that the roots of their power are unethical and has people's lives. That seldom gets done on a collective basis. You will get individual people saying, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done this. But it is hard to get public acknowledgement. How do you get public acknowledgement? You have to begin with the symbolic. So yes, it's not over. But when you have not for hundreds of years ever got people can deal with the acknowledgement that something was wrong, then the pulling on down of those statues is major. It's major because it means, yes, actually, finally, we hear you. Like the other day, I saw a webinar. I can't remember where I found it. Somebody sent it to me. It was old, so I wasn't seeing it live. Okay, but it was white bankers, financiers in real estate, finally talking about renting. Now, if you're a Black person in the United States who has ever wanted to buy property, you know that you're subtly excluded from certain parts. You know that the percentage of your mortgage is going to be 1 or 2 points higher than your colleague with the same salary and the same job trying to buy the same area, etc., etc., etc. For the first time, we had people standing there saying, yes, the Federal Housing Authority prohibited the sale of these houses to Black people. The Federal Housing Authority actually threatened real estate agents that if you sell to Black people in these areas, we will remove your license. You see, most Americans don't know that the Federal Housing Authority, the state body that regulates housing and mortgages and all of that rest of it, actually structurally, institutionally prohibited the sale, prohibited the loans. You see, and so when people say, why black?
Did they do that by implementation, or these were written in the laws?
Yes. But they were in the small print that you as a layperson, things like the GI Bill, everybody knows that in the United States, after the Second World War, the government had these wonderful opportunities for returning soldiers to go to college, to buy property, to get housing, and so on. And we know that in the latter part of the 20th century, the way you build wealth was through real estate. What nobody, so they inexpensive housing, you could buy a house $6,000 or $8,000 at no cost, or etc., etc. What people were not was that black GIs were excluded from those bills, and the few who managed them had to pay more, get etc., etc., etc. Well, 3 or 4 decades later, those are sending their children to private schools because they've got equity, whereas the people who fought in the beside them can't send their. Let me tell a story and then I'll stop, because this was really about a decade ago now, when I was president of the Association for the Study of the World African Diaspora. We had our conference in Ghana. We showed a film called Traces of the Trade. It's one of the most courageous films I've ever seen, because it was made by a white woman who discovered that her family, had been amongst the largest holding slave trading families in the United States. They have the records. She knew who they were. And she was so appalled by it. She wanted to do something. And so she traced the family history and wrote descendants of these brothers who'd been slaveholders, and said, I want to do something. She knew the family had traded in Ghana and Cuba. So she brought people. It was a panafestia, and they filmed them. They came to Ghana, they went to Cuba, etc., etc., etc. But the point I make was, at one point, they're having a family dinner and they're debriefing their experiences. And one of them is saying, but we are not responsible. These were our great-great-grandparents. We're no longer responsible. It's not our fault. And they had to be honest and say, okay, what was the legacy? And they went around the table. There were like 10 of them. 9 of them had been to Ivy League schools, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Brown. The only one who didn't was the only one of them who was descended from a branch of the family that had not been involved in the slave trade. There were 3 brothers, and 2 of them had been involved in the slave trade, built equity, and one of them had not. His descendant, all those generations later, went to community college. All of them who had been involved in the slave trade, they had equity, and they all gone to, yes. And so this was a white family.
Yeah.
And they faced the legacy, the consequence.
That substantiates the GI Bill argument that the advantages enjoyed decades ago have remnants that those descendants are benefiting today. Very good.
As the national regulator of the communications industry in Ghana, the National Communications Authority seeks to ensure an environment that is safe and fair for consumers and service providers. NCA grants licenses and authorizations for operation of communication systems and services, develops guidelines to streamline communication activities, establish and monitor quality of service indicators for operators and service providers. NCA is in 8 regions: Nkrumah, Tamale, Takoradi, Kumasi, Ho, Koforidua, Sunyani, and Bolgatanga. Do you have unresolved complaints with your service providers? Contact us on 0800110662, 0307011419 between the hours of 8 o'clock a.m. and 5 o'clock p.m. from Monday to Friday, or visit our website at www.nca.org.gh and follow the procedure for filing a complaint or submitting enquiry. National Communications Authority, communications for development.
Let's talk about COVID-19 in Brazil.
I'm an ambassador, remember.
How did Brazil become the second worst in the world behind United States on numbers?
Because I hate to say this, but because it had leadership that refused to acknowledge that it was a highly communicable disease and not some conspiracy theory. And they played politics with it.
Interesting. And there's a certain gentleman who also thinks the same, and his country is leading the pack globally.
It is not an accident.
And the other day I looked at the numbers, or at the time, I haven't looked at it now, but the top 5 countries with the worst COVID-19 numbers, 4 of them, United States, Brazil, United Kingdom, Italy, and then France. The top 4 were run by right-wingers who were very haphazard in their dealings with COVID-19. Talking about United States, Brazil, and then Boris Johnson.
Russia.
I mean, is there a pattern here? You said it wasn't an accident, but it looks like there's a pattern here.
I also want to point out that that same thing showed 5 countries that were handling it best were all run by women. Just saying.
Which?
Okay.
Saying. I know Denmark is one of them, right?
Yes, I'm actually looking up. I'm trying to see who sent it to me. I'm looking it up. But you see, the thing
what are
is,
those countries, by the way?
Yes, okay. The worst are the United States, Brazil, Russia, Spain, the United Kingdom, Italy, France. The countries that are recognized as having the best crisis management are Germany, Taiwan, New Zealand, Iceland, Finland, Norway, and Denmark.
And they're all run by women.
Absolutely. I can send you the WhatsApp that I was sent.
That's interesting. And so your host president is tested positive, I heard, right?
Yes.
How's he doing?
Yes. He says he's well. He says he's fine.
Okay.
You know.
So
yes.
you mentioned about images of Africa. We've always shown, I mean, the Western media has always shown Africa as, you know, this backward place, poverty, famine, disease, and everything. I see some images in Brazil and they look pretty similar. What have you discovered since you've been there?
Look, as we all know, the continent of Africa is no different from any continent regard. We have extreme poverty. We have saints, we have sinners. we are all trying to figure out the best way of and governing us in reaching complex societies, period. We are all in this together. And so Brazil is no different from Barbados or Britain. You know, it's to say, the diversity that you will find in any society, globalization and capitalism, all the things, they've affected us all. So we are all dealing with the stratifications of the creation of the modern mercantile Atlantic world. And
so go ahead and finish up, then we'll move up to business.
For me, it's interesting because I'm ambassador to Brazil. The Brazil mission is actually in charge of the whole of South America, not the Caribbean and not Central America, continental South America. Most of the countries are, of course, Spanish. In continental South America, there is one Portuguese, one British, and one Chinese. There's French Guiana, and Ghana was impacted. Those three. Portuguese.
Which country?
Were in Britain.
Portuguese, Dutch, and Britain.
The Dutch came to Suriname, and the British ended up in Ghana. And three of them passed through Ghana. All three of them passed through Ghana. So the history of who we are is so intimately linked with the history of who those countries came. I tell this story, I had the privilege of accompanying Odumfo, the Asantini. He visited Suriname at the end of 2020. And it was the most astonishing thing. I mean, many things happen. I'll just tell the story. We were taken to Brokopondo on the edge of the Maroon communities. And the people there are adamant that they are not but Ghanaian. They put on a ceremony, singing and dancing and so on. At the beginning they started with sacred drum. I was singing beside Nana Drabanghini, and he started chanting the names of the gods that this 20-something-old Surinamese man who looked as if he'd never left Brokopondo, Suriname. The drumming, the food. I mean, at the state dinner, we were served that they called Dokno.
Really? In Suriname?
Absolutely. It was sweet rather than savory. It was a sweet corn dish wrapped in palm leaves called Dokno.
Wow. So let me, we have a final maybe 5 minutes or so. I want to look at the business opportunities in South America for Ghanaians or Africans. That's one area of the world that we don't see much of business interaction. Or is it that a lot is happening and we're not seeing?
Not enough is happening. I consider a great untapped resource. More companies are now Ghana, as we know. Kumasi Market is a Brazilian company. The airport is a Brazilian. What we call it, highway, the graphic road bypass was a Brazilian company. So there are many companies beginning to work in, we need the reverse. Brazil, they buy our cocoa. They buy our cocoa, but they use more cocoa they can grow, so they buy our cocoa. Also because our Ghana's distinction quality of our cocoa. But they need to stop buying our chocolate. I think it is a great untapped. I think there's so much potential there that we are not using, recognizing, and we come with so many ideas and so little time. But it's a good question, and I could sit down and have a much longer talk with you about it. But there's both in terms of culture, I believe in building on what we already have, right? One of the things that has me is, for example, what they do with cassava here, the variety. At home, we don't do any wheat.
Really?
With cassava.
Do they grow cassava there?
Oh my goodness, it's their staple. Not only do they grow cassava, it's their staple. And you can walk into restaurants and get a dozen desserts made of cassava. Cassava flour, cassava. Oh, it is so, there is so much that we could learn from each other. Basic, don't forget the cocoa that has made Ghana's fortune in the last century came from Brazil via Fernando Po.
Right.
Our climate and landscape, just look at a map. They broke away from us, all those millennia ago. So that's a complicated question. We have we have gold. We have gold, they have gold, we grow similar things. There's so much more that can be done. But not just in Brazil. One of the things, for example, that it was heartening to see, the elections seem to have stalled things, but we don't know what's going on in Guyana. But it was very striking that when Guyana found oil, they made a point of coming to Ghana and saying, we have similar things, and we want South-South communication. You are a new oil country. We want your expertise. They came to us. They didn't necessarily go to Exxon. They came to us and said, you have expertise. There is that kind of potential.
Okay. What about Venezuela, Chile, and all those places? I know there are Ghanaians in Brazil, but those other countries, Venezuela, Chile, where your jurisdiction spread to, what's the Ghanaian population there?
There are almost 2,000 Ghanaians in Buenos Aires alone.
Wow. Argentina, right?
Yes.
Really?
There are Ghanaians in Argentina, there are Ghanaians in Venezuela, there are, pockets, some kind. I did not know there were that many in Buenos Aires, but I've met them. There's a viable community of Ghanaians, and here. So
So I take it Brazil will have the largest Ghanaian community, right?
Yes, it does. A lot of us are students. There's a large community in the south, in the Santa Catarina area, where we've got students. And then, you have an organization like Lighthouse Chapel International, Bishop Dag Heward-Mills, he's a medical doctor. His medical doctors are getting training in Sao Paulo.
Look at that.
Bishop Dag Heward-Mills trains his doctors in Sao Paulo. And then they act as missionaries.
So for businessmen and entrepreneurs in Ghana and entrepreneurs in South America who are looking to collaborate, where would you begin And on what basis would you link them together?
Oh, there are so, it basically, I would ask you, what are you interested in? And let's do it. There are so many
Okay.
things: tourism, mining
Okay.
industries. I mean, copper in Chile, gold in Brazil,
Okay.
and
Okay.
along the whole spectrum, not just the technicalities. But for example, I remember going to Busia and they have a phenomenal gold museum on the history of gold. But there's very little mention of Africa. They were looking at gold in South,
Okay.
and I remember having a conversation saying, we need you to come to Ghana. We need the museum people from Ghana to come here so we can tell the collected story of the history of gold, commercially and everything else. How can you have a gold museum and not have the Gold Coast? It's
I
like
know, right?
I
know.
What I'm saying is, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of culture, that's the whole spectrum of things. And also, I understand it might be daunting. In the oil business, there's ExxonMobil, whatever. But as the Guyanese discovered, we've got expertise. We can work downstream. We don't have to be competing with the oil rigs. I was asked to represent us at a conference on oil, and the people at home were wonderful in giving me the notes, but we have learned so much about, for instance, the way in which we handle the social side of the business. What we learned implement so that people in the locations where we are doing the oil extracting or the gold extracting and so on, how have we learned about making sure you integrate the local society so that their labor is not being extracted to fund wealth outside in different parts of Ghana and outside Ghana? We've learned a lot about how we can keep the wealth local and keep the employment local. We've learned a lot of best practices like that we can share and that people are eager to share. So what we have to do is sit down and
Okay, very good. And I'm hoping that we will do that beyond this interview because I'm very interested in transatlantic business. And I'll have to thank you so much for making time. You have been an amazing subject to interview. But before I go, I have one final question for you. When you look at the current president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, son of a former president, you have President Rawlings' daughter, now a parliamentarian. What's in the cards politically for Abena Busia?
I have no idea. I think of myself as a teacher and a poet. And I am doing this because I was asked. And I don't know. I don't know. I have so many things I'm interested in.
You know what I don't know sound like? I don't know is another way of saying the door is open.
I'm about to retire from the university, so I could do whatever I want. No, but what I'm trying to say is I have spent my life doing what I really care about. And if nobody asks me to come and do anything again, I don't mind because I've got things I want to and need to do, and I've earned my pension.
Good.
But
so then we So in 2024,
come and
2024, Nana is no longer running. And whoever succeeds him asks you to be his running mate. Yes or no?
get through 2020. Can we just get through 2020? None of us know what's going to happen. We've got an election to win, you know.
Well, 2020, in 2020, we have a candidate and a running mate. What we don't have is a candidate and a running mate in 2024. So when that time gets here and you are asked, as you were asked to be ambassador to Brazil and you politely said yes, the question pops up in 2024. What happens?
We'll see what I'm doing in 2024. We'll see what in 2024. I pray to the Lord I'm still alive. Let's begin there. You know.
Wow.
Really, you know, you do what you can and you take the opportunities you can, and you can't predict what's going to happen. You know, I was asked to be deputy to Pakwesi Undum by President Kufuor. I wanted to, but the circumstances did not work for me at that time.
Okay.
But you know, when 2017 came around, I was just stepping down as chair of my department. My term was over. I had earned my sabbatical. I had, 18 months sabbatical. So in that sense, I could say yes, but it was also easy. Yes, I could go to my university and say, I want to do this. And they said, fine, we will keep you as professor. You don't have to resign or retire. We'll just put you on leave. Go see how it goes. You know?
You know what? I hear all that. But I'm going to end this on the note that the absence of no is a yes in this context. And so on that note, I'd like to thank you so much for being so gracious with your time.
NPP is a very well-established party. You cannot assume what they will do. You know, you have to pay your dues. You have to earn your dues to do something like that. I am not assuming that people think I've paid my dues. I'm not. Being my father's daughter is not enough. It'll get me to the door. Yes.
Some will say the man who is vice president today, until he was announced, some will say he had not paid his dues. And so that necessarily may not be correct.
What can I say? You're determined to have your narrative. As far as I'm concerned, I pray and make my decisions on a daily basis. You know,
on that note,
yeah.
I'd like to thank you for joining us on Diaspora Weekly. This has been an amazing conversation. And Her Excellency Professor Abena Busia, daughter of former Prime Minister of Ghana, and an accomplished poet, a feminist, professor, all of the above. And you've been generous with your time, so I appreciate you. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you very much.